Good afternoon. I call this public hearing to order regarding the rezoning of 172 Main Street, PID 552-90803. This meeting is to discuss the proposed amendment to the land use bylaw to rezone 172 Main Street from the 1 and 2 unit residential R2 zone to the medium density residential R3 zone. Purpose of the public hearing is to provide an opportunity for members of the public to comment on the proposed amendments before council considers whether to proceed with second reading. Before we begin, I would like to review a few ground rules for this hearing. All comments are to be directed through the chair. When you come up, please state your name and civic address for the record before speaking. Speakers are asked to focus their comments on the proposed rezoning application. Individual speakers will be limited to a time period which we will establish shortly. Additional time may be granted at the discretion of the chair. Everyone will be treated with respect, and it is expected to extend the same courtesy to others. Questions of clarification will not be held at this meeting. However, the hearing is the primary focus will be on hearing from the public. Comments become part of the public record and may be considered by council during deliberations. Council has not made a decision on this matter. The purpose of this hearing is to receive information and comments before council deliberation and reaches a decision. We'll begin tonight by asking the Director of Planning to provide an overview of the application. This is just the hearing. We're not, yeah. No, this is just a public hearing. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council, members of the public. My name is Darren Shoup. I'm the Director of Planning for the Town of Kentville, and I'm just going to run through some of our policy considerations when we looked at this particular application. Are you good on that side? Okay. Okay. So this, as we know, is an application for rezoning at 172 Main Street. A complete application was received on April 20th of this year, and the intent was to rezone from a 1 and 2 unit dwelling R2 zone to a medium density R3 zone. And the stated purpose of the application was to expand the residential permissions applying to the property so that the site may be marketed for a future medium-density residential project consistent with the town's planning framework. That was the stated purpose on the application. With regards to the property itself, it's PID 55290803. It's approximately 4 acres in size. The current designation is residential. Current zone is 1 and 2 unit dwelling R2, and again the proposed zone is medium density residential R3. And the existing development on site is a single unit detached dwelling with various accessory structures. Aerial image of the property gives a sense of the extent of those 4 acres and basically where the location of the current dwelling and accessory buildings are. Also the access from both Main Street and from Elmont Avenue, which we'll see a little bit more. A little bit of a different view, fall time view where you can see through the trees a little bit to get another sense of the size and the configuration of the property. And now for basically the policy review, is which staff has gone through in detail. So the first policy is policy GD4, where it's the intention of council to ensure that growth and development within the town is efficient and cost effective by, and highlighted the last 2 letters there as the relevant ones, where we're concentrating new development in adequately serviced and properly planned areas, and also encouraging and facilitating infill development on underutilized and existing undersized lots within the built-up area of town. In this case, 4 acre lot would be considered underutilized. Policy IM7, it shall be the intention of council to consider amendments to the MAC of the land use bylaw when the proposed zoning change is not specifically prohibited within the plans, and at least one of the following conditions is true, and in this case, condition A is true, where the proposed zone is enabled by this plan for use within the same designation. So the designation is residential, and they're looking to go from one residential zone to another, which is permitted. This is a depiction of our general future land use map, indicating the various designations, with orange being residential and the primary designation for this area, with a little bit of parks and open space in the northeast, some institutional in the southeast, and a little splotch of commercial in the northwest. With regards to policy IM8, it shall be the intention of council when considering a rezoning application or other land use bylaw amendment application that includes a specific development proposal to have regards to the following. In this case, there was no specific development proposal, so we did not have to review this section. Policy IM9 it kind of captures the case where there is no particular proposal. It's the intention of council, therefore, to take into account the other potential development scenarios that may be permitted as a result of proposed zone change when evaluating a rezoning application. So even in the case where a proposed design is provided, those aren't binding in by any sense, but in this case there wasn't any. So council has to consider all of the potential ramifications of allowing this higher density zone on this particular lot. This is our zoning map. So the pink and the center lot being the primary focus for today is R2, and there are some other R2s along Main Street, as well as a few R3s. The majority of that lot is flanked by R1 lots on Elm Avenue, Wayne Street, and Southview Avenue. Just to give a bit of context for the area. And lastly, we have to look at the land use bylaw as well to make sure that the proposed lot, the subject property, meets the minimum frontage and requirements for the R3 zone, and it did in this case. So that's the extent of what we needed to provide for a review, and be happy to turn over the presentation of the applicant from here. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Director Shoup. We'll now ask the applicant or the applicant's representative if they wish to address council.
Just the arrow keys.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and Darren. All right, so thank you all for attending the public hearing on our rezoning application for 172 Main Street. My name is Lauren Isabel, and I'm a planning consultant with Brighter Community Planning and Consulting, and I'm representing the property owners for this rezoning request. So the site is conveniently located along Main Street, just off of Exit 12 and Highway 101, which the close proximity is a great locational advantage. The site is conveniently located just off Main Street, which provides regional connectivity. The close proximity to Exit 12 and Highway 101 is a locational advantage because this is the main connection through this part of Nova Scotia and is therefore well positioned for anyone needing to commute. Another advantage is that Kentville functions as a major center with employment, schools, healthcare, recreation, shops, and public services nearby. So as Darren mentioned, the property is approximately 4 acres. It is owned by Robert and Aidan Scott and currently designated residential with R2 zoning for 1 and 2 unit dwellings. This application is requesting a rezoning for medium density residential, or R3. Sewer and water services are available in this area of town, although no assessment of capacity has been made at this stage since no specific development is being brought forward with the rezoning application. The primary access is shown here on Main Street, and the additional frontage is on Elm on the right-hand photo. So as we've seen in the mapping, the property is significantly larger than nearby residential parcels. It is also what's called a flag lot. So the section attaching onto Main Street there allows a parcel form which would permit future development to be set back from the street while maintaining this access. So the section of Main Street has been evolving. As we saw on the zoning map from Darren, there are 2 new rezoned R3s nearby, and it is considered appropriate for additional residential density. So these are some photos of the actual property itself. They show the extensive lawn and mature tree cover, which create opportunities to accommodate additional residential density while maintaining meaningful setbacks, landscape buffers, and visual separation from neighboring properties. In the context of the rezoning request, this would help demonstrate that higher density can be considered without assuming the entire site would be built out, or that impacts on adjacent properties would go unmanaged. So today, Council is being asked to consider whether the underutilized service land should continue to be limited to R2 permissions or to be allowed to support additional medium density options. So the application at this time is just for the rezoning. So that would constitute a map amendment of the land use bylaw only. No rewording changes are required. And it is not a request to approve a specific building design or development concept. So it is important to remember that any future development on this lot, if the R3 zone is approved, would still be regulated. According to the land use bylaw section 4.1.27a, the site plan approval process would be triggered by new structures in the R3 zone that abut R1 or R2, which is the case for this lot. So the new structures or additions would trigger the site plan approval process, which is more stringent than as-of-right development. So site plan approval would allow the town development officer to evaluate proposals based on a predetermined set of objectives that manage impacts on neighbors. Additionally, if the approval is granted, the site plan approval, if that is granted, notifications are sent out to nearby property owners who are given the right to appeal the decision to council. And council can make any decision that the development officer could have made, so they could overturn the decision of the development officer, giving continued control and influence to council in the future if the rezoning were to go ahead. And then if the approval is not appealed or the denial is upheld by council, the approval is upheld by council, then it becomes registered, and so it continues to apply to the property even if it is sold. So whatever the approved site plan would be, if there was a rezoning and a request for a specific development, that would force future owners to respect the considerations put in place for adjacent properties that had been negotiated by the development officer. So the site plan criteria are what would be triggered in a site plan approval brought on by the land use bylaw section 4.1.27a. And the site plan criteria are intended to ensure that development is not reviewed only by use or density, but also by how it functions on the lot and how it affects nearby properties. The approval criteria focus on practical design matters, such as where buildings, parking, driveways, walkways, lighting, landscaping, signage, waste storage, and stormwater systems are located and how they are managed on the site itself. And overall, the criteria are about reducing adverse impacts, ideally to zero, and supporting safe access and circulation, protecting neighboring properties, and ensuring the completed development remains suitable and complementary to the surrounding neighborhood. And so that is done through the ongoing maintenance requirement, which is one of the approval criteria as well. So as Darren mentioned, policy IM9, if there's no specific development criteria, could require council to consider potential development scenarios, and as well at the PIM and the PAC discussions included a lot of questions about what the potential density on the site could be. I will go through some more close-up of these, so don't worry if you can't quite see them. I just wanted to give kind of an overall here. So in response, 3 conceptual yield scenarios have been developed. So again, these are not proposals for development. They're just meant to illustrate given the constraints of the lot and building code, requirements of parking, things like that, what would be a realistic range under the medium density style? And the conceptual layouts show that development can be concentrated while preserving treed edges and buffers. So in a sort of higher end of density, based on the calculations of where the more extreme slopes are on the site, the requirement to retain existing vegetation in a site plan approval, around the edges. So we've kept the mature tree stands essentially and not disturbed the slopes. But this shows what 32 units on the site could potentially look like. There's many different configurations. This is just one for illustrative purposes. So the orange color is showing 4 stacked townhouses. So that means it has a height of 2 stories maximum. And each of the 4 townhouses would have 8 units, which is giving the 32 unit total. This would trigger a requirement for 40 parking spaces minimum. So that's shown there in the gray. So the colors on the bullets correspond to what's highlighted on the map. And amenity space is shown in green. So there's private spaces provided for each building, as well as some common amenity spaces shown here. And a 2-way vehicle circulation driveway with potential 1-way access lane out onto Elm Avenue. So again, please keep in mind, these are not being proposed. They're density yield illustrations only. In a medium scenario with 24 units total, we've chosen to illustrate what 2 stacked townhouses, so same as before. So the 2 in the middle would be the stacked townhouses with 8 units each, height of 2 stories. And on the outer edges in this layout, there would be 2 single-story townhouses with 4 units each. This would require 36 parking spaces, again shown in gray, amenity space in green, and the driveway for circulation. And on a lower end of this with 12 units, this is what having 6 single-story duplexes could look like on this particular lot. So the yield here of 12 units, we have 12 parking spaces, again, amenity space provided in a common area, and the driveway and turnaround access. So keeping the trees intact and well set back from adjacent properties in all 3 of these scenarios. So, as I said, all 3 preserve the buffering, provide amenity space, ample site circulation, parking, and the existing treed areas can be maintained from anywhere in a 32 to 12 unit range. It's not to say something outside of that couldn't also meet these criteria. These were just based on sort of market calculations and what was practical for this particular site in our view. So not what we're building. The density calculation is based on a desktop review to show what could be feasible. The estimation of 17 multiple unit buildings provided at the public information meeting would not really be something that, given the parking and circulation requirements, could actually be provided on this site. So we just wanted to illustrate that very clearly here and provide something based on a more technical analysis. So these yields represent reasonable scenarios given the site plan criteria that would be triggered by a request for development on this particular site, as well as cost and scale constraints for actual construction. And so, you know, just as an example of that, it would be prohibitively expensive on a site like this to have underground parking. So we, went with surface parking. And in terms of just kind of stepping back and looking at Kentville itself as a place for growth, I wanted to quote Kentville's 2025 to 2029 strategic priorities plan. So priority number 3 recognizes the importance of investing in growth and development. And in particular, it states that without growth, the population will be stagnant and total assessment values will increase at levels less than inflation, leading to an increase in taxes without upgraded or new infrastructure or services. We need a balanced approach to growth. And I would say that this is sort of reiterated in the municipal planning strategy when it describes medium density residential zone and says that most of the medium density dwellings are found adjacent to downtown, including West Main Street and Main Street, where single family units have been converted over the years. So, we believe that this demonstrates that, Council, in their approval of these policies and plans, have taken this into consideration and that this has been deemed an appropriate area for growth in general as well as medium density. And I won't belabor the planning rationale. We've been through this with Darren. The municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw are consistent with this zoning request. It was recommended by the Planning Advisory Committee and moved ahead at first reading of council. So the rezoning is appropriate in our view because it is already designated residential. The R3 zone is enabled within this designation by policy IM7A. The site is large and could accommodate more intensive use. The property is in a serviced area of town, which is an important sustainability and financial consideration. So we're not moving into new greenfield areas that require additional infrastructure. These things already exist. There's roads, there's sidewalks, there's pipes. And it is close to services, employment, and institutional uses that could be utilized by future residents. As well, because of the site layout, it could be, as shown by some of our density yield calculations in different forms, it could be accommodated, good for diversifying housing options in the town of Kentville. So the policy criteria are met. And in summary, the rezoning will not provide a pathway to development without oversight. It will allow potential for infill on an oversized lot with an appropriate area of town that is serviced for growth and provides an excellent location for a walkable lifestyle. So I don't think we're taking questions.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm going to open the floor to public comments in a moment. If you are a resident of Kentville, we will welcome you up. But can I just get a show of hands of how many people are wanting to speak, and then that will kind of help us. Okay. So we'll invite you up one by one, and we'll give you each 5 minutes to speak. So we'll start with whoever wants to come first.
I'm closest.
All right. Just let me get my timer on. Hold on a minute.
You won't need your timer. I'm
Okay.
not going over 5 minutes.
All right,
but
okay.
Do we have to do?
All right.
Folks, neighbors?
And just state, we know who you are, but just state your name and address for the record.
I'm Tim Hughes.
Okay.
I live at 161 Main Street. I have several reasons to oppose this particular rezoning, but today it sticks in my mind because on this nice hot day, I cannot open my windows or enjoy my backyard because of the stench that is wafting from the municipal wastewater treatment facility. And anybody in the neighborhood knows that this has been an ongoing problem, which demonstrates that the facility cannot now manage its intake. So adding more to that by increasing the residential density within our community seems, well, just incorrect until that problem is actually fixed and can be adapted to accommodate the increased density. It makes no sense to your point, Darren, about considering the possible futures of an R3 zoning, what its impact is on the community. So at this point, I don't think it warrants being rezoned to accommodate, essentially as was presented in the last meeting, increasing the value of one individual's property to the detriment to the enjoyment of the other people in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Whoever wants to come up now, I welcome you up. Come on up.
I'm Steve, yeah.
Okay.
Is there a mouse?
It's just on the keyboard. I'll get you set up.
Thank you. While he's getting set up, my name's Stephen Pache. I live at 20 Elm Avenue in Kentville. Good afternoon, Mayor, councillors, staff.
Two arrow keys there to move.
Thank you. And members of the public, my neighbors. So I'm here tonight to express my opposition to the proposed rezoning and explain the very real impacts that this change would have on my family, my property, and the surrounding single-family neighborhood. You can probably see my property, 20 Elm Avenue. It's a little rectangle. I don't know if I can point to it. I'm getting in trouble. This little rectangle up here. But it's not just a rectangle. Where's the page down?
The two side arrows there.
There we go.
Yeah, okay.
Our property is not just a rectangle on a map. It's our retirement home, which has taken a lifetime to achieve. When we purchased this property in 2022, we did so in great measure because of the character of the area of this neighborhood. We understood that it was a low-density residential neighborhood consisting primarily of single-family homes. This proposed rezoning would fundamentally change that expectation and introduces a level of density that's not compatible with the existing neighborhood. While other speakers may talk about broader neighborhood impacts, I'd like to talk about the material and irreversible negative impacts that this rezoning will have on mine and neighboring properties. This is a view of my backyard. It's a lovely property. If you see the picture on the left, you can see a fence in the back, southeast corner, That is the corner that abuts 172 Main. When we purchased this property, been through that already. So you can just see the back corner where we abut 172 Main. Our property is quiet, it's peaceful, it's private. It's got a full view of the nighttime sky and unfettered access to sunlight. All of this is at risk with this rezoning application. Oops. The image on the right, it was nice to see some slides with an overhead view, but I think this is more realistic of what an 8-unit, multi-unit residential development could look like. The picture on the right is actually from Giffen Court in North Kentville. These are in construction 8-unit buildings. And this is the potential that I am now facing in my backyard. I have 4 major concerns that I want to address. The first being loss of privacy. My property currently enjoys an exceptional degree of privacy. Any multi-unit development inevitably place significantly more residents directly behind my home, additional windows overlooking into neighboring backyards, a pedestrian thoroughfare, or even potentially a driveway on the little lane that abuts my property and looks directly into my kitchen and dining room windows. The result would be a substantial loss of privacy for not only me and my family, but also many of the surrounding neighbors. My second concern is noise. A higher density development means more residents, more vehicles, more visitors, more activity at all hours of the day and night. Noise generated from parking lots, vehicle movements, conversations, outdoor recreation areas, deliveries, and general day-to-day activities will inevitably affect neighboring properties. What is currently an extremely quiet neighborhood would become much busier and noisier, reducing the peaceful enjoyment of our homes. My third concern is light pollution. In addition to the lighting that each and every unit in one of these multi-unit buildings would have, multi-unit developments require expanded outdoor lighting for parking areas, walkways, entrances, security, and increased lighting may be viewed as a small issue, but for neighboring homeowners, it can significantly impact the enjoyment of our outdoor spaces, even affect sleep. We value the ability to enjoy our backyard and homes without excessive artificial light shining into our properties and depriving us of our view of the night sky. My fourth concern is around access to natural light. Depending on the scale and design of any future development, neighboring properties could experience increased shadowing. Sunlight's an important component of outdoor living spaces, gardens, landscaping, and overall property enjoyment. A larger and denser development has the potential to diminish access to natural light for adjacent homeowners. In our case, as avid gardeners, this is a significant concern. While I appreciate the bylaws require buffering and mitigation, there is no amount of mitigation and buffering that can fully eliminate these negative impacts. As you've seen on the map, 172 Main Street is completely encircled by existing single-family homes. 17 of these properties have backyards that abut 172 Main. If this application is approved, it will result in significant negative impacts on these properties and their owners and their right to enjoy them. This was
Steve,
going to scroll.
your time's up. I'll give you, if you want 15 seconds to wrap up, but.
Okay, I respectfully ask council to consider whether this proposed R3 zoning is truly compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. You have an opportunity, if not an obligation, to prioritize the rights of existing property owners who are taxpayers and voters. 120 plus signed a petition in opposition to this. And I ask that you prioritize those to the benefits of, over the benefits of one applicant who may no longer be a resident of this community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Sorry, dear. Kelly Grant. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council and staff and neighbors. Microphone. Oh, I will do the microphone as soon as Darren's out of the way. Okay. My presentation is going to focus on the environmental aspects.
Can we just for the
Yeah.
record, just
Oh,
your name
sorry.
and your address?
Kelly
yeah.
Grant, 20 Elm Avenue.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Kelly.
Kentville. So I'm going to focus on the environment, near and dear to my heart. I'll demonstrate how replacing this mature and effective green space with an R3 medium density footprint introduces critical vulnerabilities and removes vital natural defenses against our increasingly challenging weather events. So as we've seen before in the pictures, we've seen fall pictures with no canopy. This is an extremely canopied property. As you can see, there's trees all the way around, mostly on the south or the north end. They have tremendous value to all of us. At a time when Kentville is developing a climate risk action and assessment and action plan, which I value, I ask you to consider the value of this forested property, whose trees intercept rainfall, absorb stormwater, reduce erosion, sequester carbon, provide shade and wildlife habitat, buffer noise from Main Street, and contribute significantly to the character of our lovely neighborhood. If you approve this R3 amendment tonight, there is absolutely nothing in Kentville's bylaws to stop a future developer from clear-cutting this entire property. So by the time that a development officer would look at a proposal, it could be bare. I know it sounds ridiculous and probably not going to happen, we hope, but there's actually no bylaws protecting those trees. An owner can do what they want. So even if the trees on the steep slopes are retained, and you'd hope they would be, a future developer would likely remove as many remaining trees as possible to maximize building footprint, push buildings, parking, and driving lanes as close together as the regulations allow. The reality is that without a development plan, we have no way of knowing what will happen, and council has no way to prevent it or to manage it. A 6 or 10 foot buffer to surrounding properties is too small compensation for the loss of this mature forest, and leaving it as R2 provides a much greater protection. Next, let's look at the actual nature of the site. This is off of the flood, what is it called? Anyway, this is the town's mapping. It's a bit fuzzy, but I've blown it up, and it clearly shows the presence of significant severe slopes in green in many parts of this property. This is a very sloping property. These green parts are just over 25%, but much of the rest is also sloping. Introducing an R3 medium density footprint into this site is going to amount to a lot of earth moving in retaining walls to get it done. It brings a higher risk of soil erosion, mud runoff, and altered stormwater movement. Through the construction phase, there's going to be heavy grading, excavation, and the building of many potentially huge retaining walls, especially at the entrance, whose driveway is going to have to be enlarged substantially. These are going to impact negatively all the neighboring properties at the grades below. These are significant environmental consequences. Lastly, we must consider the reality of our changing climate. In the past few years, we all know our town has suffered severe, costly flash flooding events that have overwhelmed the town's infrastructure, causing damage to homes along Brook and Crescent Avenue and the north side of Maine. These are our neighbors too. The town has already initiated the Millbrook feasibility study to address historic stormwater infrastructure gaps just down the road. This floodway overlay map shows this existing vulnerability in blue. These are very low-lying properties. They sit at the bottom of the gravity chain, and 172 is at the top or close to it. So, R3 designation permits a sweeping footprint of thousands of square feet of impervious rooftops and asphalt parking lots. So taking away that tree canopy and paving it over means greater risk for future severe rain, flash flood events. And even with storm mitigation plans, there's still a risk of overwhelming our municipal storm networks and creating direct financial and structural liabilities for many residents in this part of Kentville. So in conclusion, from an environmental standpoint, 172 Main is entirely unsuitable for medium density. The environmental realities of this hillside cannot be engineered away without creating undue risk and severe downstream hazards. Buffers cannot replace a mature forest, and steep slopes pose erosion risks, and paving over this paradise could aggravate the flooding Kentville is already working to address. Forcing intensified development into an environmentally vulnerable sloping lot is a long-term liability that Kentville doesn't need, and I respectfully urge you to deny this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, and residents of Kentville. My name is Lloyd Schmidt, and my wife and I live at 176 Main Street in Kentville. I want to speak to you about the safety issues this application for rezoning at 172 Main Street to an R3 zone will present. There are three different safety issues that I'm concerned with. There's fire safety, traffic safety, and safety from rainwater runoff. I'm going to step on Kelly's toes a little bit here too. I'm going to cover this again because I think it's important. Number one is fire safety. In order to accommodate fire equipment, ambulances, and police vehicles, the property needs at least 2 access points, which would meet the minimum standards for those types of vehicles. Currently, there are none. The lane beside my house would be the primary access point. It would need to be widened. In addition, there is a carriage house that would need to be torn down in order to accommodate a 2-way road. That structure is currently in excellent repair, and I leave it to the council's best judgment to consider its historical value. It's been there a long, long time. The secondary access point under consideration would be on Elm Street, and it is not currently functional to anything other than a lawnmower. 172 Main Street could not provide enough room for as many emergency vehicles as would be required in the event of a response like the one recently at 183 Main Street. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. It was a major alarm, and I couldn't count the number of vehicles that showed up. And there was nothing on those screens that would have possibly handled all those vehicles. Just to summarize, there are currently 6 key fire emergency risks to consider for this rezoning application. Reliance on a single access point. Secondary access on Elm Street is not functional. Limited frontage constraining internal roadway. There's unverified fire flow capacity and hydrant servicing. The increased density without a defined fire suppression strategy. And site topography constraints, again, Kelly already covered that. Traffic safety. My wife and I live on the only access lane into the property at 172 Main Street. This one-way access lane services 176, 200, and 172 Main Street. There are a total of 8 separate mailing addresses at these locations. This lane is adequate for the current traffic load, although it can be a challenge entering or leaving during busy hours. I'm doubtful it is adequate for the load an R3 zoning would present, especially during an emergency. The sharp turn coming up Wickwire Hill is too close to the access lane, and if a vehicle is traveling at excessive speed, getting out can be a nerve-wracking experience. Increasing the volume of traffic would only increase the risk of residents. Now, this one's important. Pedestrian traffic on the west side of the sidewalk is of particular concern because of the restricted line of sight, or sight line, from the retaining wall. You have to go out quite a ways, and it's pretty dangerous. There is little time to react when a pedestrian and a vehicle happen to intersect. It is even a more risky situation if someone is jogging or riding a bike or scooter, especially now that many of these bikes and scooters are motorized. Safety from rainwater runoff. Residents of Kentville are acutely aware of the hazards from stormwater runoff, as we have a history of flooding. The last flood was one of the worst, and while no lives were lost in Kentville, there was loss of life in our neighboring county of Hants. If 172 Main Street were developed under an R3 zoning, a large number of trees would be removed and would result in serious erosion. In my opinion, this could endanger property and lives. So I would ask the council to consider carefully the safety issues this rezoning application raises. And when you're thinking about it and you're weighing the pros and cons here, to reject this application would only mean a loss of opportunity to a developer, okay? There's other opportunities that are going to come along. But accepting the rezoning would have a far more negative effect on the surrounding neighborhood, and I would hope you would consider that, and I thank you for the opportunity.
You're right on the dot. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak on this application?
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me okay?
We can.
Good. My name's Jerry Hardy. I live at 14 Elm Avenue, and my wife and I, Leslie, have lived here for 21 years. And I'd like to thank the mayor and council for holding hearings like this, because they are important to the residents of Kentville, and your dedication doesn't go unnoticed. Today I'm going to focus on 3 points. The first point challenges the validity of the application itself. The application had no plan at submission, even though application procedures state that it must have a plan. Granted, plans have been presented today, largely, I suspect, in response to the criticism of the application's lack of plan in the first place. But these plans presented are hypothetical suggestions, nothing more. Many people in this room seem to know recommendations were made to remove the need for the plan. However, the process has not been updated for whatever reason. The fact remains, the current rules in the public domain state that a plan is mandatory with the application. And if it's mandatory with the application, it's mandatory. Hard stop. The application should have been denied at submission. Number 2, I'll quote the application's purpose that says, in part, quote, so that the site may be marketed for a future medium-density residential project. A planning strategy should help, stop quote, a planning strategy should help ensure that growth in the town proceeds in a manner that complements existing neighborhoods, infrastructure, safety, green space, et cetera, et cetera. It is not intended to make it easier for residents to promote the sale of their property. Again, the application should have been denied at submission. It does not meet the spirit of the town planning strategy and severely and largely serves the applicant, not the town. Number 3, let's assume the property is rezoned and sold to a developer. When the developer decides to proceed with the medium-density housing, additional public consultation is not required. In other words, residents largely lose the ability to influence any projects. The role of the resident is reduced to that of a witness. We don't believe that this is a pie-in-the-sky scenario. We believe that such a scenario will likely unfold, which begs an obvious yet silly question. Why on earth would residents be in favor of such a series of events and take on the vagueness and anxiety that will be the result of the approval of this application? In spite of all this doom and gloom, there's one glimmer of hope, and I'm going to refer to the Municipal Planning Strategy of 2019, Chapter 5, Objectives and Goals, Objective number 3. It says that it will protect the character and development of established residential neighborhoods. Our house was built around 1932. The house next door, Stephen Kelly's, was at 20 Elm, was built at about the same time, and both were designed by a renowned Nova Scotia architect. The house at 19 Elm Avenue was built in the late 1890s and actually has an image of the cross in the brickwork of the chimney. The house at 7 Elm was built in the early 1900s, owned by a produce distributor who was well known in the Annapolis Valley and beyond. The house at 40 Elm was built by a former mayor of Kentville. The house at 28 Elm was built more recently and reflects uniquely red brick with sweeping gables and roof lines. The house at 176, often referred to as the Schaffner House, has classic farmhouse architecture. I could go on and on. This is not a pop-up neighborhood. It's established, it's historical, it's beautiful, full of mature trees, and is well maintained. It screams for the protection outlined in objective number 3.
Your time's up, Gary. If you could conclude your remarks.
Certainly.
Thank you.
I'm right at it. Mr. Mayor, councilors, as elected officials, you have the obligation to acknowledge the objections have been made to date and are being presented today, and the 123 signatures that were on the petition that was presented in opposition to this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. I'll ask one final time if there's anybody else. Okay, come on up.
Hello and greetings to Mayor and councilors and my wonderful neighbors. My name is Kathy Fuller. I live at 40 Elm Avenue. My husband, Tom Herman, intended to be speaking today but was called away to a memorial. So he left me these notes, and I'll just add that we are both biologists, so you may find there's a little bias here. And Tom says, in the previous communication, he detailed concerns about the application to rezone 172 Main Street. Today, the comments focus on several aspects of those concerns that I think are particularly important. They include concerns specific to the property under review and more broadly to the planning process as it currently exists in the town of Kentville. Tom and I own 2 of the houses, 2 of the 14 or 1 properties directly abutting 172. We reside in one and rent the other. But as residents of Elm Avenue for 39 years, we've come to appreciate that our neighborhood is far more than a collection of properties. Our neighborhood is diverse in age, background, culture, and socioeconomic status. We have a healthy mix of single and multi-unit dwellings. We celebrate that diversity and appreciate our neighborhood is far more than a collection of properties. We are also proud of our mature landscapes with tree canopies that have been nurtured by residents over the years. Landscapes that sustain wildlife, retain water, moderate climate, and reduce the impacts of a warming planet. We also recognize that neighborhoods are dynamic, not static. Over the years, people come and go. Families are created and grow. Buildings are renewed and occasionally replaced. Yards and grounds are lovingly tended. In short, neighborhoods evolve. But like any living systems, neighborhoods have limits. They have capacities that, if exceeded, can lead to collapse. But when neighborhoods are respected and supported, they are remarkably resilient. And that resilience has never been more important in assessing the major challenges that we face today. Those challenges, sustainable economies, climate change, and biodiversity loss, are closely connected and impact us all. And although their reach is global, their resolution is largely local, one resilient neighborhood and community at a time. Unfortunately, our existing planning structures, policies, and bylaws in Kentville are woefully inadequate to address these challenges. There is little integration of planning across departments. There is no comprehensive mechanism to assess landscape carrying capacity or to assess the true value beyond tax revenue of those landscapes. And there is no attention to intergenerational planning. Further, there is no effective mechanism to enforce development plans, even in the short term. To make matters worse, there have been recent efforts by outside developers to substantially weaken our already inadequate municipal planning guidelines. Their recommendations to eliminate any meaningful review of the potential impacts of development, as well as of the capacity of landscapes and neighborhoods to sustain development, have largely flown under the radar, unseen and unknown by most Kentville residents. This underscores the importance of Council's role in stewarding the best interests of Kentville citizens and the integrity of its neighborhoods. Councilors cannot make reasoned decisions and meet their fiduciary obligations in a vacuum. They need data to do so. You can't measure the impact of an event if you don't know whether it's a simple tidal current or a tsunami. If we are going to realize the vision of Kentville 2030, as so eloquently outlined in our municipal plan, we need to constructively engage the community, seek the guidance and expertise of its citizens, and embrace our resilient neighborhoods. It should be a celebration, not a battle. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. I don't see anybody else jumping up. Okay, come on up.
Good day. My name is Ken Harrison. I'm at 46 Smallwood Place, just across the way from where 172 is going to be changed or developed by you. So I want to make it very clear, I probably in this room have been in that neighborhood for the longest of anybody. I've been in the house that my parents had built, and we started to occupy it when I was 9, which is not yesterday. So I have seen this neighborhood change over the years, and there is a great deal that can be said for its integrity. And for it started out as basically as farmland. When my dad bought the lot that we currently own, that was probably 1946 when he came back from overseas. So it was an orchard. There were about, probably 30 to 35 apple trees on that property at that time. And there were some of the older houses that other owners have mentioned that go back to the 1930s, and Also, Verna Boats' old house, which is the original farmhouse for that property. So when you tie it all together, it is really important to realize what you're doing and what you're attempting to preserve for the members of this area. When I first was there, of course, there were lots of kids my age. It's changed a little bit, just like I have. So I want to make it very clear that it's vitally important that you avoid going the R3 route, because the access to that property, I noticed on one of it, they have that little alleyway coming out to Elm Avenue. As one of the presenters remarked, that's not going to work. It simply is not going to work. I've been here, the RCMP depot was in the apartment building that's right on Main Street. And that at that time, it was only responsible for things outside of Kentville. Kentville still had its, and still does have, its police department. But I can imagine that people coming up around that corner, which was steeper then and sharper, were pretty scared when somebody came out through that one access that you see on the map with their lights going and responding to an emergency somewhere out in the county. That was before the RCMP moved out to the Jones Road location next to the Neminas Fire Department, and of course since then have moved next to the connector. But I'm just saying, there's been a lot of change, and really management of change is your critical, important thing to do. And I echo all of the things that I've heard in the last few minutes. So I thank you for your time, and hope that you'll keep it as R2 and not go to R3. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Well, I would thank you all for your comments. I will invite the applicant up one final time if they would like 2 minutes. If you'd like to, I guess. It's up to you or the applicant's representative.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So I just wanted to add a couple points to a few of these things. Not that I am suggesting that it is remotely with any plans I've heard, but whether or not rezoning happens, there is nothing requiring the current owner to preserve the trees on the site. In fact, a development approval through the site plan criteria would be more likely to trigger regulation on that matter if this is a major concern in the area. Any requirements for emergency vehicle or fire suppression would be evaluated at the time of an application, and it would need to meet both provincial and town requirements, as well as the traffic being assessed, including sight lines. The owner's personal reasons for applying are not really relevant here. It is very common for rezonings to occur, and it's just not a matter in the town's policies to review that. It was stated, and it's just not really part of the decision factors. In terms of any smell from wastewater, I'm sure the town is looking to make improvements. Again, all these things would be assessed at the time of application. And in terms of it not being in the spirit of the MPS, I would argue that that is not true and that it does meet the criteria as outlined in the municipal planning strategy. Public consultation may not occur in the future, but there is definitely a right to appeal that is granted within the surrounding area, which arguably is actually a higher level of potential control for citizens than just speaking for council's consideration. And, I would encourage any citizens that are not feeling that the current MPS and land use bylaw is adequate to take part in the plan review that is ongoing and to have a more fulsome discussion in the next iteration of the planning documents. This application needs to be considered under the current policies and regulations. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Council acknowledges and appreciates the written and verbal comments we've received during this process. All correspondence that has been submitted are part of the public record, and they'll be considered by council later this evening when this matter comes forward. I now declare this public hearing for the proposed rezoning of 172 Main Street closed. Thank you.